Hi there, my name is Suzy Vadori, and we're going to talk about writing stories today. I'm here with Wordsmith with us, put on by the Young Alberta Book Society and sponsored generously by the Rose Foundation. I am an author, and I write stories. I've got a couple of books out. The Fountain Series is my series that's out right now. The Fountain is book 1. And The Westwoods is book 2, and hot off the presses is Wall of Wishes. This is just coming out at the end of June. It'll be available at all your bookstores on June 30th. But let's talk about some of the books that you may have read. So we might start off in our families and we read some picture books, right? We all remember these books. The Quiet Book. We might start reading some longer stories like The Giving Tree or anything by Robert Munsch. Because he's got tons and tons of fun stories in here. And then as we get older, we might start reading Dia Stilton, Geronimo Stilton, Harry Potter. We might read The Land of Stories, or we might read some of these books that are put on by other Young Alberta Book Society authors. We've got Finding Atlantis, we've got Ghost Messages, we've got some Marty Chan, Frozen Brains. So there's tons of good stories out there. And if you guys love stories, I'm going to bet that you also love movies. I love movies. I'm going to share with you a couple of my kids' favorite movies. They love Cars. They love both the Frozen movies. They also quite like Hotel Transylvania and Home Alone. So these are movies that you might have seen as well. And what are you thinking? Do all these things that Suzy's telling us about, what do they have in common? What does this have to do with writing stories? All of those things that I just showed you, from the picture books through to the movies, have one thing in common. And that's that they have a great story behind them. And those stories were written by somebody. And I'm going to teach you today how to write a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end that might someday, yes, it's going to be read by everybody that you know, but it also might someday be turned into a book or a movie. So how do we do that? That's a good question. We're going to talk about 3 things today that you need to put together in your stories. And then you're going to have a chance to try to do some writing, and I hope to get to read it. So the number one thing that we're going to decide when we create a story is the character. Who are you going to write about, right? So every story has a character. If we look at the Land of Stories here, we can see that it's about the twins. So if you guys have read these stories, who fall into a storybook, right? So they're the characters in this book. And then next, we're going to give your character a problem. So falling into a book and not being able to get home might be a pretty big problem, right? So why do we want to give a character a problem? Well, if you had a story where the characters don't have any problems at all, it might be kind of boring, right? You want your character to have to, so throw things at them. You want them to have to overcome those problems so that they change by the end of the story. We'll talk a little bit more about that change. So we're talking about characters, we're talking about giving your characters a problem, and how your characters change throughout the story. So I'm going to just share my screen here so that you guys can see some pictures of some stories that you might be familiar with. So if you know what this story is, I hope you know that it's actually The 3 Little Pigs, right? So if you know that this is The 3 Little Pigs, then you can see in that picture there that we've got 3 pigs and a wolf, right? They're all in the story. But who is this story actually about? It's about the pig in the bottom corner there that's leaning beside his house of straw, right? And he's the first little pig that we meet, and he doesn't want to spend all day working, so he builds his house out of straw or grass, basically dried grass, and he builds his house, and he's pretty happy until the big bad wolf comes along. And the big bad wolf, what does he do? Say it with me. He huffs and he puffs, and he blows the house down. And the first little pig has to run to his brother's house, and he runs to his brother's house that built his house with sticks. And the big bad wolf comes along, and he huffs and he puffs, and he blows that house down too. And by the end of the story, all 3 of the little pigs are inside the house that the 3rd little pig built. And he built the house of bricks, and he spent the time to build that house, and then they were safe. And so the first little pig has actually gone through a change. In the first of the story, he built a house of straw. And by the end of the story, he realizes that I think the next time he's going to build his house of bricks so he won't be safe, right? So we have a character, we have a problem, which is the big bad wolf, and we have a change. How about this one. So Jack isn't actually in this picture, but this picture is all about Jack and the beanstalk. So Jack, at the beginning of the story, he trades his cow for a set of magic beans, and then a large beanstalk grows, and there's a beautiful castle at the top with all kinds of riches. So that's not a problem, right? Except there's a giant, and that's a big problem. And so Jack has to overcome that. So we have Jack, who is our character. We have a problem, which is the giant. And then we have a change, which is all the smarts that Jack gains by outsmarting the giant and getting back to the bottom and chopping down the beanstalk. And he won't be so quick next time to trade his cow for a handful of beans. All right, how about this one? This one looks like Cinderella, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about Cinderella because Cinderella is a little bit longer, and we're going to look at the beginning, the middle, and the end of Cinderella. So I'm going to tell you this story like this. So when we write a story, our story follows what's called story mountain. So you might have seen this before. You might talk about it at school. So this is how most stories in the world actually go. They have a beginning and they get really exciting, and then sometimes they have a moment of like, oh, okay, and then they get really exciting again, and then they end. And then at the end, we have this little part at the end where we get to see our characters change. So let's talk about Cinderella. I'm going to tell you a story. Once upon a time, so at the beginning of the story, we have a girl named Cinderella, and she is very sad. And she, depending on the story that you read, usually she's in the attic or in the basement or somewhere terrible, and she's scrubbing the floors, and she doesn't have a lot of friends. She's pretty lonely. She does have friends, but not people friends. Who does she have? She has the mice and the birds, and they're her friends. And she kind of wants out because she lives in her stepmother's house with her evil stepsisters. And then they go along, and Cinderella gets invited to a ball. So she has a chance to leave, and she's super excited. She builds a dress with the birds and the mice, and then her stepsisters come and tear the dress apart because everything that she used on it was theirs. And then she has this moment, right? And Cinderella is no longer going to the ball, except that her fairy godmother comes along and makes her a beautiful dress and sends her to the ball. And this is where her real adventure starts, because she leaves the stepmother's house and she goes to the ball and she dances with the prince and she falls in love and everything is perfect, right? Is that the end of the story? No, because what do you, the reader or the watcher of the movie, know? What's going to happen at midnight? Right. At midnight, everything is going to go away and everything's going to go crazy, right? So that's the peak of your story. And so Cinderella goes home, and then the prince eventually finds her. And at the end of the story, we have a wedding. So back here at the beginning, Cinderella is sad, and she is scrubbing the floors, and she doesn't have a lot going on, and she doesn't have a lot of people friends, right? And at the end of the story, we have Cinderella, who's now a princess, and she's found the love of her life. And so let's test the things that we've learned today. Do we have a character in Cinderella? Yes, it's Cinderella. Do we have a problem for Cinderella? Well, her problem is that she lives at her stepmother's house and she, needs to get out of there. And then do we have a change? Yes, we have a really huge change. Now, you can have a much smaller change. The change that Cinderella goes through from the beginning of the story to the end is really big. I mean, to go from being a servant in your own stepmother's house to being a princess is a pretty big change, but you could have a smaller change or something that your character learns, right? So what I'd like to do is I'm going to offer you guys a writing project, and I'm hoping that you guys will write me a story and use the things that we learned today. And so let's go over them again. I'm going to share this screen once more. Okay, so I invite you guys to write your story. So number one, you can take a character. Who do you want to write about? It can be anybody at all, somebody from your imagination. I've got a picture up here on the screen that you could write about if you don't have an idea, or you can write about your own idea. And in this picture, there's all kinds of things going on and a really cool character. So pick a character, any character, this character or somebody else. I'd love to know what's actually happening in this scene, and decide what they want. Give them a problem. What's the problem that they're going to overcome? Make it hard for your character and see what they do. And then how will they change? How will they be different at the end of your story than they were at the beginning? And then you'll have a finished story. So As an added bonus, if you guys are able to write these stories and send them, it's up on the screen here, if you're able to send them to the Young Alberta Book Society at gmail.com by June 15th of 2020, then I'll be able to include you in the follow-up video. Or if you would like to just send me questions about the story writing process, or if you would like to send me questions about what it's like to be an author, I would love to answer them. I'll be posting feedback on this segment on June 23rd of 2020. So I hope you guys have fun writing your stories, and I can't wait to read them. So happy writing. See you then.